Guten Tag, WAP. This is Mr. Liniger. Let's make history today as we go over Unit 3, Day 2, and start the Second Industrial Revolution. But let's get started with our daily punishment. Two windmills are standing at a farm. One of them says, "What's your favorite type of music?" The other says, "I'm a big metal fan." Oh, that one's one of my favorite. Key terms for today are the Second Industrial Revolution, Bessemer Steel Process, Eli Whitney, Henry Ford, vertical integration, horizontal integration, Bessemer Steel Process, said that twice, Saboteurs, Luddites. We're going to go over the causes and effects of the Second Industrial Revolution. So there are going to be some migrations during this time period. You should know this. This is one of the objectives of this unit. Some of these were push and pull factors, if you remember from geography. So, for example, the Irish are going to move to America because of the potato famine. That's going to be so an example of a push factor would be like the Irish potato famine. It's pushing them out of the country. An example of a pull factor, Japanese workers are coming to the Pacific coast of America for better jobs. Same thing with Chinese people coming to the railroad. That's more of a pull factor. In Southern and Eastern Europe, Eastern Europeans are going to move seasonally. They're going to work part of the season in Southern Europe and Eastern Europe, and part of the season in Argentina and Brazil. That would be more of a pull factor to make more money at home. That's why you're going to see some like Italians and stuff in parts of Argentina and Brazil. An example of a person that's descendant from those family members is Pope Francis. Let's talk about the factory system. In the Second Industrial Revolution, we have that in the 1800s. It's going to be engine-based factories. One of the big things that happens is you have the new type of steel, the Bessemer converter, for cheaper steel. The factory is going to replace the putting out system. It's going to require the idea of division of labor. In division of labor, people have specific jobs in the factory, and that's only the job you do. So like if I'm working at a car factory, my job is to put the tires on. Division of labor is going to allow for mass production, and it's going to allow for people to for more like machinery to be produced on a large scale. For the factory system, working conditions are often going to be harsh. Workers will lose their status. They're not skilled. You're just doing one job. You don't have to be skilled to do it. They're just wage earners. There's going to be harsh work and discipline. There's no kind of worker protection. If you get hurt or injured, you can get fired. Fast pace of work, frequent accidents. Some of the entrepreneurs and the business owners are going to be pretty sketch. Like they will not even pay the workers in real currency. They'll create their own currency, and they'll make the workers live in their factory towns and tenements, which are really cheap apartments the factory owners create. They make the factory workers buy products from their own stores and use their own script there. They overcharge them, so they're always in debt to the company, and they can't really ever leave their job until the company fires them when they get injured. There will be some protest against the factory working condition. We have the Saboteurs, who were Flemish workers who threw wooden shoes into the machines. They didn't like the machines because they thought they were taking away their jobs. And the Luddites in England, Luddites struck against mills and destroyed the machines from 1811 and 1816. The word Luddite actually means anti-technological right now. Saboteurs is where we get the word sabotage. These are two groups of people that struck against machinery because they saw the dangerous aspect of machinery as taking away people's jobs. The first industrial revolution is largely Atlantic-based from 1750 to 1850. You have it replacing the putting out system. Really, Britain dominates it. Then the Industrial Revolution, we moved to Belgium, France, America towards the mid-1800s. Germany is going to sponsor heavy industry, arms, shipping in the late 1800s. America at first started with cotton and textiles to begin their Industrial Revolution. The Civil War is going to lead to an explosion of steel, iron, armaments, clothing, and food production. This right here just shows some of the major areas for the Industrial Revolution. You can see a lot of it is like Germany, France, Netherlands, England, and parts of northern Italy. Mass production is going to provide for cheaper goods for all classes of society. Eli Whitney was one of the big proponents of mass production. He did something called interchangeable parts for firearms, so that you have like these one type of screw, and it will work on any of the screw that they have will work on multiple parts of the gun or whatever. So like when you guys like usually make things like you make chairs or something like that, you're given types of screws and knobs and stuff, and those are mass produced, and they're able to be used for like a lot for interchangeable parts. Eli Whitney also made the cotton gin, which will allow for more production of cotton for cheaper, and it's going to help expand slavery. Henry Ford is going to introduce the idea of the assembly line, where each person has a specific job, and that's only the job they do. Like if I'm working in this car factory right here, I put the glass on the windows. It's going to allow for mass production and division of labor. You're going to start to have bigger companies during this time. We're going to have two different types of companies, monopolies and trusts. And let me explain both of those right now. Monopolies are sometimes called vertical integration or vertical organizations. This is one company so vertical integration is when one company controls all aspects of the production within a single industry. For example, Rockefeller Standard Oil Company. Let me explain what that means. So Rockefeller is an oil company, but he also owned the land where the oil is made. He owned the machinery that is used to turn the oil into gasoline. Like he could do the whole process himself. There's no middleman. Vertical integration cuts out the middleman and allows for it to be all done for themselves. If I gave you a hypothetical, if McDonald's was doing vertical integration, McDonald's would own farmland and they would own animals, so they wouldn't have to buy the animals or the food from any other company. They would do the whole process themselves. The other type of monopoly is called horizontal integration. This is trust or cartels. This is when you own all the industries from manufacturing to marketing of a common product. For example, Farben is the world's largest chemical producer. And what that really means for horizontal integration is this. You buy out their competition. IG Farben was famous for buying out other chemical companies and merging them together in trusts. So there wasn't a lot of competition. If you wanted to buy chemicals, you're going to go to IG Farben. If we're doing our hypothetical example again of McDonald's, if I have a horizontal monopoly, then if I was McDonald's, I would buy out Burger King and Taco Bell and In-N-Out Burger, and there would only be like one fast food company. Usually when we're thinking about monopolies, we're talking about horizontal integration. But that's actually a trust. It's actually kind of weird. There are some generalizations that you should know for this time for what are some of the big effects of the second industrial revolution and the first. You're going to have increased population. People are going to move to the cities, so you're going to have increased urbanization, increased migration during this time, increased immigration, which we talked about. You're going to have new social classes, the business middle class, entrepreneurial class, the working poor. There's going to be new consumerism. People are going to buy products during this time for consumption. You even have like new machinery being created during this time for consumerism, electricity, light bulbs. Ooh, I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is going to become a big deal. The earliest versions of refrigerators and freezers will be created during this time. You'll have new roles for women and poors and minorities. At first, a lot of the people that worked in the factories were women and children. They would pay women less than men, so women would get hired in a lot of these factories. Often, women were treated really poorly. A lot of factories would want to hire women that were unattractive because they were less likely to get married and leave the job. And the factory could actually fire you if you got pregnant and had a kid. There was no kind of maternity leave or anything. Women that might have their child might go back to work the next day. Children were paid the worst, and children would be used in very dangerous jobs, like in coal mines. They would be used to light the candles. A lot of times the carbon dioxide would build up there, and they would die through explosion. If children were lucky enough to survive working in coal mines, they would often get black lung and die of cancer. But these groups of people are going to be working in factories. In America, they use a lot of new immigrants, people from Southern and Eastern Europe, to work in their factories, Irish people who are old immigrants. There's going to be changes in child rearing, childhood, especially these kids, these poor kids that are working in factories are not going to really have a childhood at first. Eventually, by the end of this unit, there will be more leisure time. There'll be a rise of a middle class. So there'll be more time to leisure. There'll be more people focusing on sports, common culture. Central parks are created during this time. You have more sports being created. You have the idea of a leisure time. There will be more demand for social reform, especially because of how harsh the conditions were. More demand for workers' rights. Unions will be formed. Unions will push for workers' rights and the ability to strike and collectively bargain. Eventually, they will get better working conditions, and laws will be passed to increase workers' rights. Like there'll be laws passed that will force children to go to school, make truancy illegal, and there'll be laws that will do limits on how many hours you can work. And eventually, there'll be reform bills in England and America that will protect unions' ability to strike. Eventually, after all of this, and some of these things get a little bit better with like the government starting to regulate, you're going to have increased lifespan, increased living standard, decreased death rate. Countries are becoming industrialized, so slavery and serfdom is going to die in a lot of these industrialized societies. However, you're not going to really see environmental laws being passed until the 1900s, so we are going to see environmental degradation, destruction of the environment. This right here just shows the chart over the first and second industrial revolution. The first was 1760 to 1850. The second was 1850 to 1945. The first was in Great Britain. The second was in all over the world. The major form of energy in the first was rivers and coal. The second is going to be petroleum and hydroelectric power. Machinery used in the first industrial revolution was steam engine, and the second, the internal combustion engine. The major means of transportation in the first was the locomotive and the railway. In the second, you have automobiles, electric trains, trams, aircrafts. In the first industrial revolution, workers are going to be paid by salary, and machines were brought together in a central factory under the same roof instead of the old domestic system where like one person just did the textiles in their own house. And in the second industrial revolution, you have the Ford system where people have specific jobs, you have division of labor, and you have mass production. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. We are done with the industrial revolutions. We'll be talking about some of the big political developments in the Western worlds coming up for the next couple of videos. Until next time, deuces.